Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome and thanks for joining. My name is Shailesh Kaul and I run sales entering here at Precisely. I'll just give everyone a few more seconds if anyone is tuning in a minute late, and then we'll get going. All right. For anyone who joined a few seconds late, we haven't started yet. Just wanted to give people a minute to join the webinar. It's only 15 minutes. Want to make sure that no one misses much. But now that we are a minute over, so let's get started. Welcome and thanks for joining. Over the next 15 minutes, here's what we will do. We will ask one simple English question. We'll have one data platform and we'll identify 3 candidate sites in New York's financial district, scored and ranked with a clear recommendation for each. The workflow you're about to see replaces what used to be months consulting engagement. Well, let's get going. Here's the uncomfortable truth about site selection. Whether you're picking a store, an insurance target, a clinic, or a warehouse, the decision is almost always made with incomplete data. Different teams pull demographics from one vendor, traffic data from another, competitors from a third, risk from a fourth, and then they stitch it together, sometimes in a spreadsheet, and then they make a multi-million-dollar commitment on that patchwork. The cost is huge. 1 in 5 new retail locations fall short of forecast in the first 2 years. For insurance, mispriced property risk can wipe out a quarter of yearly profit. For real estate, the wrong block can cost 20% of yearly operating income. The data to do better exists today. It's just rarely all in one place at the right level of detail. So today, I'll show you what changes when the data is all in one place. One prompt, plain English, no code. I'm using a coffee retailer as an example for my demo. But if you're an insurance underwriter picking clinic locations or citing a warehouse, the workflow stays the same. Same engine, different question. 60 seconds on what makes it possible, and then we run it. 3 things have to be true under the hood for a single prompt to produce a defensible site report. First, coverage. One platform with hundreds of data points already attached to every address. Demographics, income, property values, business density, nearby places, crime, walkability, risk, and wherever available, foot traffic measurement. All linked to the same address. And one thing up front, no single data layer is mandatory. The model adjusts to what's available in your geography. And you will see exactly what I mean in a minute. Number 2, resolution. Most public data stops at the zip code level. In Manhattan, that's useless. One zip can cover tens of thousands of residents and millions of square feet of commercial space. You need address level resolution. That's the difference between the financial district is a good market and one Wall Street has 248,000 average household income. Third, linkage. Every data point tied to a real location on a map. The agent asks one question that pulls from all the layers at once, not 4 reports stitched together. One question, one answer. All right, let's jump in. Let's see it all live in a demo. So here's the demo environment. Behind this environment sits a connection to the location intelligence data platform. Every data layer I just mentioned is a callable tool. And I'm going to paste one plain English request. No tool names, no parameters, no SQL. Just the question. And what is the question? Evaluate the New York City financial district for 3 coffee retail sites, analyze demographics, income, population density, nearby places and competitors, property details, and neighborhood characteristics. All things that one would want to evaluate. That's the whole instruction. The agent figures out which data sets to pull and how to weigh them. And it has started. Look what's happening in the background. It's calling all those data sets and pulling that information together to make that decision, to create that comprehensive report. Property data, POI data, which is points of interest data sets, which tell what's in and around a particular site that's of interest to people. It's getting all that information here in the JSON files, which it will then start to use for its overall decision making. The travel boundaries, the geospatial data. And then once all that data is pulled in, it's creating a report. So let's take a look as the report starts to build up. So we got the aerial intelligence, we have the demographics and income information about the 3 sites that it chose. We have the geosite demographics, the lifestyle segments. We have the neighborhood profile for New York City. We have the foot traffic and movement analysis, which tells you how many people typically visit these sites and at what times of the day. The patterns for the days of the week, cross-shopping behavior. For coffee, the competitive analysis and the cross-shopping behavior. What else is at these locations? Some of the competitive landscape categories. And now, building the same thing for Site B. And then for Site C. And then the crime risk assessment. Giving all the details, the 10-minute travel catchment summary. And then a matrix, a scorecard, where it's stacking each site with the other one and actually telling you the differences. And then the final site recommendations with the appropriate reasoning of why this site was chosen. And we'll walk through some of those parameters on a high level of why one was rated higher than the other. And most importantly, the data sources. What did it really use to come up with this analysis? It's really important in this world of AI. This is all precisely data, as you see. It hasn't gone out to the internet to find information. Now, for a lot of our customer base, they have their own data sets, which we can take into the calculations and take into account when we come up with this analysis. But the important thing is that this is all contained. This report is created through precisely these data sets. Now, let's read the summary. So Wall Street came up as the top summary, top location at One Wall Street. And there's a bunch of reasons from, it's a professional hustle segment, the 1 to 5% of US households by income, and under 39 urban professionals, which are the #1 coffee audience in America. And we'll go into other details as well, but just a high-level summary. Now, #2, it's recommended with volume-focused strategy. It has the highest footfall site, which means the population, the people, the foot traffic that is in and around this site is actually more than the Wall Street one. But still, it wasn't recommended as the first one. So that'll be interesting to find out why. And then the third option, which is not the preferred option, but it does have it scores really heavy on the crime index. It has the lowest crime index compared to the other 2 places. So it does have to put that into contention depending on who the audience is and what you're trying to do as your selection criteria. So if we scroll up and go all the way where we actually started this process with the prompt, this is where the overview was provided. This is the precisely ID, which ties this location to this unique identifier. And we use this identifier to pull all the other information that you actually see as part of the site. There is property details about each of these sites, the building that hosts this site, what those are, and the stories and the square footage and the aerial intelligence. You have that information available. The primary occupancy and the commercial use from a licensing standpoint, so you get all that detail as well. The demographics and income information, obviously really important. These seem to be all in the same ballpark for all these 3 sites, if you look at it. There is the average home value, which is available for some sites. For some sites, it's not because those may be more commercial in nature. The monthly rent is available, and you can see these little trophies. This is sort of highlighting which ones score the most among these three sites. And then the lifestyle segment, right? What what are these places? And it can tell you right up the top that site A only, because site B and site C are pure commercial blocks. So it's giving you that information that the people who live in and around that site A are downtown professional hustle. That's the segment that it chose for that. Tells you the income rank among 1 to 5% of the US households, the age profile, majority under 39, which we saw in our final recommendation as well. That is the downtown professional hustle site segment, who are the most frequent coffee drinkers. Neighborhood profile, which tells you the walkability score and the public transit score. Important for a coffee retailer that how many people can walk to that place. New York City, not a lot of parking, so people can't really drive to that place much. So this becomes really important. And then foot traffic, right? We talked about this. There is different zones in foot traffics. And I don't know what zones means. We'll ask that follow-up question, but you have the number of visitors and you also have the hours when people actually visit. So you see the peak hours. So again, coffee, you can attribute it to the early hours of the day. So if the foot traffic is more in the morning than at nighttime, so it doesn't matter what the overall foot traffic is. Your majority of the people are there in the morning. That you will lean more towards that site naturally because of the number of people being there. Weekday share and weekend share, really important. Cross shopping behavior, you see some of the competitors from a coffee retailer standpoint, and you see how their business is. The nearby points of interests, what brings people to that place in general, you get that information for each of these three sites. Crime risk assessment, we talked about it. It's New York City, so it is obviously on the highest. But again, you have to look at it in relative terms that the site C has the lowest, which we found, which we saw in our final summary, that it was the lowest in that. And then you have an analysis here, which you can read through, that it says clearly that site C is dramatically safer than site A and site B, reflecting Battery Park City's gated planned community character. So you get all the information that you actually need to start trusting the data, which is the most important thing from a precisely standpoint. Then you have the 10-minute travel catchment summary, which tells you where these things are and what those places are. Where can you really go in 10 minutes? And then the final scorecard, where you have a matrix which has all these categories listed, and you have the scores and the values for each of these sites so you can look at them holistically. And then the final recommendation. So you saw how within the last 4 or 5 minutes, by using one simple prompt, I was we were able to actually get all this information about a particular site, which sort of would take you months to gather all that information. So that's the whole point of actually using the data, the when it's all in one place and it has the right context. And I did want to ask that follow-up question, which we sort of discussed in the beginning. What are zones in foot traffic data? And I think there were zones 1 to 5. So I'm just going to ask that question again. There will be elements of this which one might not really understand. So trying to understand what those zones are, you can follow up. You can really ask a follow-up question in understanding what this data really means to really get to the bottom of the analysis and not just take it for what it is. So as I asked about the zones, it's basically telling me how do we create these zones? What does that really mean? And how to differentiate between different zones? So you get all that information is available to you, and you can ask questions about each and every attribute or category that you actually see in that report that is created. So before we finish this off, I also wanted to kind of give you, for the GIS enthusiasts in the audience, like how does this all translate into a map visualization layer? And I can pretty much ask the same question here on a map, and it will return me the same answer and provide me all that information for New York. Zoom in, I'm going to zoom in a little bit once this finds that those locations on a map to sort of show you how you can visually inspect all this information as well to sort of provide a more spatial view of the site that is really in contention here. So if I were to zoom in here a little bit and select this One Wall Street information, I'm going to zoom out now. It folded this. So here's the One Wall Street, New York. And you can see that all of that information is also available here. So I have the demographics information here, which tells me everything that we already read in the report. I have the foot traffic information, again, tells me all about the total number of visitors. And the hours here is the time zones of the day. And then the competitor information, which is the nearby competitors, where they are and how they're located. So depending on how people like to consume the data, the application supports the Word, the reporting format, or some people want to see things more on a geospatial way. They can use the application as well to understand the context and more on in more of a spatial way. So so that was kind of what I really wanted to cover as part of the demo. Awesome. So that was the quick demo of the site selection process using Precisely's application on how we can select sites and how we can perform a comprehensive analysis. How do we take it further from here? We will have the documents here for you, a couple of documents which you have which should be available in the webinar, and you can explore more about Precisely's APIs and the MCP tooling. And then there are also some case studies out there for data-driven solutions for retail. Quick recap in the last 30 seconds. 15 minutes ago, we asked one plain English question. We got back a scored sourced site report. We asked a follow-up question and got a clear answer in the same session. And we finished with a map view your team can take to the CFO meeting. The data to make these decisions exists today. It's all connected, detailed, and available. If that's the workflow your team has been missing, we would love to show you more in detail. Thank you for your time.